I can already hear the complaints that this video is over an hour long talking about a new drivetrain option for the Rivian R1T and R1S. Well, typical out-of-spec stuff here. To make it easier for you, I'm leaving chapters in the video on the YouTube app, so feel free to skip to areas that you're interested in. Or, of course, if you want a quicker watch, there'll be plenty of other creators who make shorter, less content-filmed videos out there that will satisfy all the information that you guys probably want to know. But the nerds, you guys want to know everything about this, so that's what I put in this video. Everything we know about the Rivian new dual-motor Enduro drivetrain system. Let's get into it. So then on the exit, watch what happens when I apply throttle. We will now be able to get that on throttle oversteer, which is always a great time.
When you build it with silicon carbide devices, the peak efficiency in that range is slightly above 99%.
So here we are stuck. Here's full power. I'm matted, right? And it can't get the power to get us out of this situation. So we had the same thing in the dual motor. So we'll back it up a little bit, and then we'll give a little bit of 2-foot and momentum. Nope.
Whereas on the quad, we've got a single or a standalone disconnect clutch on either side of the quad motor drive system. On the Enduro system, it is nested within the drive unit.
Feels really nice. Certainly this is getting the job done, but this slight delay of getting the torque over, this is where I want lockers, more or less.
Yeah.
But it's doing it. And like you said, the torque multiplication effect, basically, is really good. Hello, and welcome to another Out of Spec Reviews video. You join me in Normal, Illinois at the Rivian plant. And we're going to be going on a plant tour and seeing some amazing things, but I'm here mostly to experience the new Enduro drive system on the Rivians. This is the dual motor system. Those of you know, I actually own a Rivian R1T. I've put roughly 40,000 miles on it now, and it is the quad motor large pack. And that was really the launch specification for Rivian. Well, there's new versions coming down the line, different size batteries, different motor architectures as well. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this video, is the new dual permanent magnet system that they're putting in the truck. So we're going to get nerdy. We'll talk to a whole bunch of people. I'm going to drive the quad motor versus the dual motor back to back. We're going to be doing towing. Should be an epic video. So join me on my adventure today at the Rivian factory here in Normal. All right, guys, will you join me at the Rivian factory? How sick is this? There's no secret I'm a Rivian enthusiast because truly I love my truck so much, but it doesn't mean it's perfect. I've been just talking with some of the engineers here about a ton of improvements that are coming. I think some of you guys are gonna love this stuff, and also just giving feedback on where I think it's important to really focus time for the end user case. And we'll talk about maybe more of those things to the end of the video. Everyone here is very open and receptive to feedback and improvements, so I can't thank the team enough for being totally open to our coverage, and all of the comments you guys leave on these videos, they read, and they've been adjusting the truck because they know the out of spec audience are the nerdiest audience. So they appreciate all of the nerd stuff. And that's what I want to bring you today for the dual motor video. It's, I'm kind of expecting you guys to have a general high level understanding of how the Rivian operates, large pack. We're going to actually drive a max pack vehicle today as well. I got the full scoop on that, so I'll be able to give you everything we know about max pack and also the LFP standard pack. So there's so much information. It's a great opportunity to be here and to sort of help convey everything that's going on, reading between the lines of what they can and can't officially say, but we can start picking up on. So what I first want to do is walk you through the drivetrain choices, the battery pack choices, and tell you what exactly we're going to drive. We're then going to head out on the test track and drive dual motor and quad motor back to back, which I think is going to be fascinating because there's a lot of improvements to this dual motor over the quad motor system. And then we're actually going to tow with it if there's enough time. I hope so, because they have an R1T with a Rivian EDV service van on the back of it that we're towing. It looks really cool. It's hilarious. It's amazing. And yeah, so just a fun day here at Rivian. Then we're going to go see the factory, see an exploded view of the motor, really dig into the changes and get super nerdy towards the end. So let's, at the beginning of this video, focus on all of the driving differences and changes. I'll of course share with you everything I'm feeling. Look for feeling that automatic reconnect and disconnect switch. We've got so much to cover in this video. Not enough time ever. I'm only here for a few hours, so let's get as much as we can.
Well, guys, you know it's going to be the nerd video and a long one here at Out of Spec, but this is, you know, it's not just a motor change on the face of things. There's a lot to get into. Yes, I'm in Germany right now. I shot this video about a week ago. There was a bunch of media outlets who got to go and do this program, but of course I'm here to bring you all the nerd stuff, also as an R1T owner sharing my impressions on this new drive unit. First thing I want to do is explain to you just roughly how the dual motor fits into the lineup so you have some more understanding as we get into the testing bit of this video. The base configuration for R1T and R1S, the flagship Rivian product, is a small LFP battery pack. We don't know exact kilowatt hour capacity, but that is actually a Chinese built battery. They do not produce that in normal. It comes in as a full module ready to go in the truck. I was actually going down the production line inside Rivian. I'm like, where do you guys make the LFP? And they're like, oh, no. That just comes as a full battery from China. Interesting. So maybe not great for tax credit situations because a lot of that needs to be US sourced materials. We'll have to see. Somehow Tesla does it with LFP, so maybe there's a way around it. The base truck, again, small battery, dual motor. These are the new Enduro drive units. The Enduro drive program is this new motor, this new permanent magnet electric motor we'll be discussing. Currently, the truck that's on sale right now is the middle spec battery pack, roughly 140 kilowatt hour gross, 126, 127 usable. And that is with the Origin drive unit. That's the quad motor system. That's a Bosch motor and gearbox with a Rivian inverter. So that's from a supplier, not built or spec'd in-house, but not designed in-house. The new dual motor system, the Enduro, completely designed and built in-house. Then there's the Max Pack, biggest battery pack available, which is the exact same configuration, almost sadly, as the large pack. I was really hoping we'd see a big ass 800 volt system, fast charging, better cooling, and the only difference between the large pack and the Max Pack, which is roughly going from 140 to 180 kilowatt hour gross, plus or minus is my understanding, is just a chemistry change. Same layout, same construction, same everything, same wiring pattern. So that'll be interesting to test. It also makes it seem like the upcharge for Max Pack maybe isn't so worth it. Just off of first glance, we'll have to do future videos on this. But interestingly, you can only get the Max Pack, the top spec truck, with the dual motor drivetrain because they're going for ultimate range there. So the actual range improvement from a large battery pack dual motor and a max battery pack dual motor probably isn't going to be that much in the real world, or at least like not going to make near as much of a difference as I was hoping it would. So that's a slight disappointment to start. The quad, I think one of the reasons dual motor is only available in, Max Pack's only available in dual motor is just to show a high range number of 410 miles EPA. So anyway, you have 3 battery pack sizes. You have 2 motor versions, 4 motor and 2 motor. Within the 2 motor version, there's a software limited dual motor and then the software unlocked dual motor performance. Right now, Rivian is only producing the dual motor performance. We'll get into more of the nerd stuff as we go. And please take a look at the Rivian configurator if you want to know more about what options there are available. This video is going to be, basically for Rivian enthusiasts, people who are familiar with the truck, who already have a basic understanding of the options and everything like that. So let's get into it.
First things first, I have a quad motor and a dual motor right next to each other. And the way that I can tell that this is a quad motor truck is the yellow brake calipers and the yellow, outline around this Rivian name. For example, here I can easily tell this is a dual motor truck with this black badge and of course the silver brake calipers on this particular one over here and no outline. Now, some of the team has said there will be slight styling differences between dual motor and dual motor performance. Those have not been announced yet. As far as we know officially, the badging will be the same between the two. And I guess maybe before I even tell you about those differences, I should tell you what's going on with the dual motor system. So here you have a gorgeous R1S and R1T next to each other. We're actually going to go inside here. This is the delivery center where I took delivery of my truck over a year and a half ago now. Right there is where I was able to take delivery. But I want to head over to the Skateboard chassis and walk you through what we're going to be experiencing. So what you're looking at here is sort of the launch configuration of the truck. And this is what everyone's familiar with. It's the large battery quad motor configuration. And Rivian says the quad motor is going to stick around and probably will never leave the R1 lineup. It is the top drivetrain choice. They also didn't confirm that they will update it, but it kind of seems like maybe at some point in the future, possibly the quad motor will receive some updates as they continue to iterate on this platform. Nothing soon, though, was my impression. So here's what's available now. The original quad motor, it's a Bosch system, of course, but the in-house designed inverters was a great system, but it does have some limitations and it is giving up on some efficiencies. The dual motor is designed to be produced all here at the factory in Normal as a collaboration between the hardware team, the software team, to make a fully homogeneous, integrated system that's really built from the ground up to be used in this full system. And that's what we're going to be experiencing. So basically taking, rather than 4 motors, putting 1 motor on each axle. It's a dual permanent magnet setup that we'll be experiencing. And the dual permanent magnets also, you know, the front motor is your primary axle and the rear motor is your secondary axle. There's a clutch disconnect on the rear axle that works differently than like Ioniq 5 or others. It's like a really quick disconnect right inside the motor. It's really cool. They claim it will happen almost seamlessly. They're like, if you're really looking for it, you might be able to feel it here or there. But yeah, that's definitely fascinating. I want to show you inside of this truck as well, because this is a max pack truck. You can see 410 miles of range right there. R1T Performance Dual Motor Max Pack Adventure. So this is really a maxed out vehicle right here. And I'll walk you through the battery pack changes. I got the full scoop on this, but I want to continue talking about the motors. The dual motor increases efficiency, of course, because it can dynamically disconnect and reconnect the rear axle. There's also less losses. Overall, it's just going to be a quieter, smoother package. They claim they fixed the half shaft issues in them, which is really great. Here's actually the motor on a stand that you can see. There's actually 2 versions of this motor. There's a silicon version and a silicon carbide version. I'm talking specifically about IGBT or MOSFET in the inverter. And on every dual motor truck, the goal is that the front motor uses silicon carbide, which is significantly more expensive, but also more efficient. And then the rear motor, which is used far less period of time, is going to be just silicon. And now the Rivian EDVs will be using this as just silicon on the front axle because of cost mostly. And the efficiency gains are maybe just a couple percent. And so the EDV vans are actually all LFP standard range with the front motor out of the dual motor Enduro system. So that's in production since January, they claim, the new battery, at least the standard range. So pretty fascinating. That's just a quick view on this. Power and performance figures, the dual motor and dual motor performance, I'll overlay them on the screen, but very close to the quad motor performance when you spec this up. You do lose some drive modes though. So if we head in here, there's no like drift mode or rally mode or anything like that. And also if you don't get the performance, you don't get sport mode. Sport mode does increase power, by the way, mostly because the truck is sitting lower. And just from a vehicle dynamics standpoint, sport mode unlocks more. There's also a launch profile when you put it in lowest in sport. So just like the quad motor trucks, we'll see all that. But when you go to all terrain, you don't get all the other options that quad motor does. Quad motor is still their top for off-road, they claim. Although I think the dual motor might actually perform better in certain situations. For example, stall torque, starting from 0 RPM to get it moving. They say this is much improved over the quad motor system. I know I just threw a ton at you right there, but I have to get into a truck and go driving. So this is a very condensed trip. And of course, I'll clarify things towards the end of the video if needed. But let's go out on the Rivian test track and drive one of these dual motor versus quad motor. Here's a dual motor R1T coming in right now. Fantastic. Let's go do this thing. We are jumping into this R1T dual motor. We're on the 20-inch configuration. And yeah, let's actually see what version of the truck that we're going to be in here. So, hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
So about to go send this thing around, but we have, which battery pack is in this particular vehicle?
Large pack, I believe.
So large pack dual motor and dual performance. Ah, very cool. So I'm going to hand the phone back And if you could just introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do, because you have the coolest job on the planet, that'd be amazing.
Yep. So Werner Nagley here. I'm on the vehicle dynamics team at Rivian. Specifically, I'm managing the powertrain and braking controls. So a lot of the electronic chassis control systems.
Awesome. So all the stuff that we care about, that's your job right there.
Yep.
So that's pretty freaking sick. Just kind of getting quickly set up in the truck here, and then we will head out for a drive. So what are we able to experience in this little quick drive?
Yep. So today we'll be starting off on the oval. We'll do 2 laps on the oval, 1 in all-purpose, 1 in sport, and then we'll head back in and take you on a quick off-road route where there are a couple of obstacles that exercise the suspension and chassis systems.
Awesome.
Give you a nice flavor of what the dual motor is capable of.
Okay, hell yeah. Well, let's do it, shall we? So need the key first.
That's a good.
That's cool. What software are we on in this thing?
I believe 2023.30.
Okay, is that a public release software yet?
It's coming.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
So
it's
we're running, internal right now, but it's imminent.
Okay, so I think, if you don't mind, I'll start with how I typically drive my truck, which is all-purpose, standard ride height, ride in soft, super squishy, and then regen on high. So all the settings look very similar here.
Perfect.
So my first few inches in the dual motor, low speed stuff, feels super similar at low speed. No motor cogging even at that low speed is pretty cool. And dual permanent magnet and different gear ratio front to rear, is that correct?
Correct.
And what do you find are the differences that people are going to have in daily driving?
In daily driving, to be honest, there is not much of a difference between dual motor and quad motor.
Right, it's when you start pushing it.
It's when you start pushing it, right? Operating at the limits of adhesion where you could discern the difference. We'll go left. Let
Okay.
me call us onto the surface.
Sure.
White R1T entering oval track.
Good to go?
Good to go.
All right, so this is your track.
Yes, it is. Right outside of our delivery center.
Hell yeah. So I can see you've done some hardcore turning around through here, which is pretty great. And you just let me know what we're able to do or not to do, because I just want to get a feel for sort of daily driving. We are at quite high state of charge right now, but just, no one's behind us. I'm just going to do a regen test for, let's say, 50 miles an hour, if that's okay.
Sure.
So let's go 50 miles an hour and off. Nicer ramping of regen, but we are also quite high. The motors sound totally different.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, indeed, it's different.
Yeah, maybe like 5 miles an hour, it still makes this little whirring sound, but they're so quiet. And it does have a cool noise when you get on it still, which is cool.
Yep.
So overall, totally different experience audibly, I should say.
Yep.
Oh, and you're pre-mapped for Driver Plus here? That's cool.
Yep.
Cool beans. Well, you let me know. What should we do?
So one of the cool things to speak to in all-purpose drive mode, you'll notice in quad motor variants, we have a conserve. In dual motor variants, we no longer have a conserve.
Right.
So in quads, when you click on conserve, it switches to front wheel drive permanent, right? So it disengages the rear axle. In the dual motor variant, what all-purpose does is it's dynamically engaging and disengaging the rear axle disconnect, depending on the vehicle speed and the driver torque request. And it strikes a really nice balance between performance and then efficiency. So if you're operating low torque request on the highway, it'll disengage the rear axle. But if you go to overtake another vehicle, it'll nicely engage the rear axle and give you the acceleration that you're looking for.
So right now we're disengaged, I would
Correct.
imagine.
Right
so I'm
now
just going to mat the throttle and see if I can feel it, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So smooth. But you're also kind of ramping in the power. So part of this power ramp, it connects and then provides power.
Exactly.
I also, since there's no one behind us, just want to see how this goes. So letting off, we're primarily front regen when we come to a stop. Now my understanding is under light acceleration and anything below 17 miles an hour when starting, we're hooked up.
Correct.
And so 17 miles an hour, at least with the current software, and this can change, is sort of the breakaway. So let's get up to 17. We'll go super light throttle. Barely a shudder, nothing, almost at all. That's pretty amazing. And my understanding is on deceleration at 12 miles an hour, it will try and lock up.
Correct.
So a little, if you're really listening for it, you can hear just a little click clunk.
Yep.
And I'm sure that will even improve through software. But it's so minimal
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, actually. That's fascinating. But then anytime you get a yaw motion on the vehicle, or you do something extreme, or you put in a big steering input, you're probably locked up from a dynamic standpoint.
Yep, there are conditional engagements for the rear axle disconnect.
And then anytime you go to sport mode, it locks in. I can hear it, especially at speed, connect. But
Yep.
there's no real judder or a change to force here. It's pretty cool.
Yep, and it's a similar behavior on the quad motor variants that are in production today.
Yeah, so how cool are we with kind of driving spicy?
Of course. So
Really?
we
Okay.
can do a launch right here. We can do a
Yeah.
2-foot launch.
Yeah,
The only call out is a 70 mile per hour speed limit on the straights, and then the corners are tight ones, so around 30, 40 miles per hour
okay.
max.
So no big sends then.
I can say
Is low the fastest way to launch it?
lowest, so we have ride height dependent torque limits at the front
Yes.
and rear axle, so lowest is actually the fastest if you would
Yeah.
like to experience that.
Yeah, that's
You can toggle back into
it's
lowest.
the same on quad motor too.
Yeah.
Because I notice if I do a 2-foot in lowest, then it rips, but then my half shafts start to make some noise and it's time for a replacement. So what's your impression on these? You've already obviously done some mileage accumulation. Half shafts clicking so much better.
It's better.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's do a 2-foot launch then. Ready?
Yep.
Rips.
Yep.
Awesome.
3.5 seconds here to 60.
There's really you don't need the quad for the acceleration. This is more than enough, and you're very front tire limited, especially with this setup. Maybe if you had the 22s, it would launch a little bit harder.
Yep.
But man, do they not ride great in low.
You sacrifice ride comfort in lowest. For sure.
Totally. And I'm actually a fan of like rally mode in my truck to like keep it soft and let the truck move around, and really love that. So
Yeah, it's a good move.
yeah, the one thing I do want to try is like kind of coming out of this corner, if you don't mind, just applying some throttle and seeing how it feels from a standpoint. Technically, we're all going the same way, right?
Yes, we are. One way.
So we'll just go gentle around the corner to start.
Yep.
Certainly on the 20 inches, so just gotta keep it right there, and then we'll. Feels really nice through the middle. Super, progressive understeer, kind of how you would want the truck tuned for safety. And wow, there's to me, performance-wise, like not much downside here. I will say though, it feels almost more front axle biased from a power standpoint, which it's not. They're the same motors, just different gear ratios, front and rear. But it almost feels like the rear could be juiced a little bit more coming out of that corner. We'll do one last try around here, and of course, on your facility and your truck, don't want to crash it into anything or do anything too crazy. But if I had my truck, I'd certainly come in way hotter and do some stupid stuff with it. So yeah, we'll just kind of get a set constant radius here. But you can actually kind of force it
Rotate it
around.
on
Yeah,
throttle.
you can throttle rotate. So that's awesome. That's just so cool. So thanks for letting me have an initial go in this. I think the way most people are going to drive it, of course, is in this configuration, all-purpose, regen and high, ride and soft, standard ride height. We'll wait for it to connect, and then it's just fantastic. So thanks for the time.
Glad you like it. Yep. We are continuously improving our products. You can say that for sure.
Great.
Alrighty. So we will transition into all-terrain drive mode. You'll notice on quad there's a host of off-road sub-modes. In the dual and dual performance, we just get one. You can think of it like all-purpose is a good kind of all-around drive mode. All-terrain is a good all-around drive mode specifically for off-road surfaces.
Okay.
And
is it the same rough all-terrain tuning as when you put the quad motor in all-terrain?
it is. It's very similar.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I find that to be pretty good. The only time I use other modes would be like rock crawl or rally are really the other modes I find myself in, and those are extreme situations, either high-speed dirt or like I'm crawling up something, which most Rivian owners aren't doing anyway.
Exactly. Yep. So we'll let the height adjust to high, and then we'll start on these white pipes here.
Okay.
I'm going to ask that we stay to the right on the white pipes. We're going to keep it in high ride height, and we don't have enough ground clearance to navigate the full left-hand corner.
Sure.
So just stick right. The next obstacle is going to be out-of-phase cross-stitch mobiles that really just highlight the hydraulic roll control and the suspension articulation. And we've got two berms set up on the U-turn where you can get some nice roll angle.
Okay.
And then we will be coming up the hill from the other side here, which is a rather aggressive rock garden, and then descending down the 60% grade. So we're good to go whenever
Great. Whenever the compressor decides to keep up.
Exactly.
Yeah. When you do a lot of ride height control, we were on track, of course, going up and down sport mode up, and you run out of air in the tank.
We're good to go now.
Cool. So all the way on the right side of this is what you say we should do.
Correct.
Okay. And what exactly should we be looking for on this particular thing? Is the suspension tuning the same?
It's very similar.
Okay, so
there's some optimization.
non-discernible.
Yeah, there's some optimization for the dual motor, but
Okay.
for all intents and purposes, the suspension calibrations and hardware is all the same between quad and dual.
This is pretty funny, actually.
Yeah.
So like here, I just want to get the truck kind of, so now I've got it on the brakes.
Yep.
Halfway up one of these berms.
Mhm.
And so let's apply throttle. Wow, pretty cool, you know, sort of that stall torque to get it to just initially rotate.
Yep.
That's one of my main issues with the quad motor system is when I'm at 0, it's hard to get it to 1.
Mhm.
And just talking to some of the engineers, it sounds like it's much better. Slight motor cog there, but almost nothing. And this particular truck is silicon carbide inverter up front and silicon in the rear.
I believe so.
Okay, cool.
Mason is a good contact
Yeah.
to double confirm that.
Yeah, really good at the stall torque stuff. I'm applying so much less throttle in this than I would in my dual motor just to get it move, or my quad motor. I'd have to give it hard throttle. So that's awesome. That's very cool. So nice work on that. Yeah, what's your impression of your stuck off road? Do you think this will actually get you moving a little bit better?
It benefits from torque transfer with the brake traction control for sure.
Because you can send that extra power versus maxing out just that one motor.
Precisely.
I've been asking for a locker on my quad motor for so long. Even just a single axle locker would
Yeah.
be fine.
Yeah.
So some elephant steps.
Yep.
But not enough to get a wheel off the ground.
No brake traction control.
We actually don't even feel this.
It's wild how level the chassis remains through that.
You're just letting the wheels do the work, and we're just, that is insane.
Yeah.
You know, I know a lot of the other journalists here may not live with the trucks or anything or are used to that, but when we take our trucks on trails, we're just like, you know, you can have like a water bottle open and just cruise around. Meanwhile, I see the dudes with the Jeeps bouncing around everywhere. So do a little side load here.
Of course.
What's the maximum angle you'll let this thing get to?
That's a good question. I can't give you an objective a number there to be
Like
quite
here, for
honest.
example, we have a wheel, you know, where
Yes.
we can teeter it. I can push it one way or the other. Actually, maybe we can even slightly back up. So you can hear the
You
brake.
can hear the brake traction control.
So that's an interesting thing. So in terms of noise performance when off-roading, you're going to hear the ABS clicking away
Yep.
in this because it's going to send it. So let's just demonstrate some of this. I'll even go off for a second so maybe the camera can pick this up a little better. So you can hear it trying to send actuators. And now I'm light throttle,
Yeah.
but if I apply more throttle, it feels very similar to dual motor actually, or to quad motor, excuse me, where certainly this is getting the job done, but this slight delay of getting the torque over, this is where I want lockers,
Yep.
more or less.
Yeah.
But it's doing it.
Mhm.
Certainly this is getting the job done, but this slight delay of getting the torque over, this is where I want lockers,
Yep.
more or less.
Yeah.
But it's doing it.
Mhm.
And like you said, the torque multiplication effect basically is really good. And like you said, the torque multiplication effect basically is really good. So great tuning on this, by the way.
Yeah.
I've driven a lot of, you know, like Land Rovers. Some of them don't have locking diffs and some other things like that. And this certainly was great in that situation. Of course, we're not on an uphill. Your truck's raising, don't worry. Wait before driving to prevent damage. Well, maybe we freaked it out on the,
You might have.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I've never actually seen this happen in one.
That's
Now
right there. First time today. It looks all good now.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know how that happened. So we'll just kind of go straight up the rocks. Is that the idea?
Yeah, then the goal is to maintain a nice walking level pace up the hill and then
Yeah.
just continue with your momentum.
Well, that's the way to drive the quad motor, at least, because if you stop and sometimes, you know, you got to go out and spot, then it's hard to get it moving again.
Yep.
So let's see how this does. I may not drive it 100% correct, kind of on purpose.
Yep, and you got a nice line here staying away from some of the orange boulders on the left.
Yep, sure.
Right.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll just kind of go straight up on this one. Light on the wheel, of course, light throttle. And it'll be interesting. Do you recommend when off-roading actually to keep stability on?
Yeah.
Because you want the most brake vectoring?
Yeah, so we have tighter slip targets with stability on because stability is tied to both stability control and traction control.
Okay.
So stability on is the right setting.
Okay, stability on is the right setting. You can still 2-foot it, which is nice.
Yeah.
And we'll just we'll walk her up. Oh, it's so funny to hear it work and to send power
Yep,
around.
yep.
It's actually almost slightly more reassuring off-road because you know things are happening.
Yeah.
You're not just like slip and then wait for it to send power.
It's an
like,
indication the chassis systems are working for you.
right. I imagine the tuning is very similar to like what the quad motor's targeting.
It is.
But at least here you can feel it.
It's just using a different actuator to get off the
So
obstacle.
that was perfect what it just did there.
Yep.
So like even here we're stuck, hard throttle, and
So now we're spinning.
now we're spinning and
Yep.
it can't get the power. So now we need a locker. We'll just slightly back it down and use some momentum to get us up. Ready? There we go. I know I'm going slower than most people probably would on purpose for that situation.
It's perfect.
But thanks for letting me at least have a go. So you can find the limits of this torque transfer, and like I know the dual motor is not meant to be the most off-road thing. Lockers, so needed. So yeah, what should we test on the way down?
Yeah, so really we let Regen do the work for us on the way down.
Okay.
Right, it's a pseudo hill descent. And then we can cover the brakes to modulate speed past what Regen is already delivering.
Of course.
And we can use the cameras to spot a nice straight line down.
And you can regen down to 0 in this, which is cool. Yeah, neato. Well, let's do it. The fans are on right now, of course, because we just gave a huge load to the motors at low speed.
For sure.
So regen really strong there.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll just feed in brakes slightly.
Yep.
So smooth. That's amazing. And so much less noise than the quad motor. I know this is not meant to be the better system than the quad motor, but there's already so many things I kind of like more about it. So yeah, epic. Thanks so much for taking us on that little course.
Yeah.
From your impression, of course, you've had way more seat time in the trucks in extreme environments than probably almost anyone. The quad motor, where do you still find it has its advantages? Like truly, where is it better?
Yeah, so I think refinement is kind of a one word answer to that question. I know you mentioned that you like the audible, the NVH feedback that the chassis systems are working, but a lot of people like how silent and almost effortless the quad feels navigating tough obstacles. And then something that we can't rival on dual in comparison to quad is torque vectoring. So for example, we can't overdrive a rear outside wheel to adjust the yaw balance of the truck.
Right, of course. So like we'll hopefully drive one of those next, and coming out of those corners, you can really get that big hit, you know, throttle steer it basically, and then hammer away. So
Exactly.
thank you for the initial impression of this. It was fascinating to experience
Good
the
stuff. I'm
differences.
glad you enjoyed it.
And I'm glad you guys are working on all the things that we talk about on a daily basis. You know,
Oh, yeah.
nothing's really a surprise from talking to your colleagues and everything. Everyone's with the program,
Yep.
which is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. So
Awesome.
you joined me and Muncie in a quad motor. Is this a large pack?
Yeah.
Okay, so same launch specification, same truck that we have at home, and be really cool to experience them back to back. So same tire selection, different wheel actually, but you won't be able to really notice that too much, but we are on the 20s. You can see, of course, all the additional drive modes that you get here with the vehicle. And just like we did when we drove the dual motor, we're going to be heading out and pretty much doing the same tests, cruising around, feeling clutch disconnect and reconnect, going from conserve to all-purpose, which something I tend to do with my truck at very low speed, so it can reduce the wear on the clutches. The other one just does it all the time. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, Muncie, what do you do for Rivian? What's your responsibility?
So I work in vehicle software, specifically on energy stuff. So anything range or efficiency and LV, low voltage related,
Yeah.
that's under my purview. So,
So, what do you think about phantom drain?
You've seen it.
Yeah, actually, it's not been so bad recently.
Yeah.
It's really improved.
Yeah, it's we've made some huge improvements on that side, like working with different ECUs and their own
Like
routing
draw
and their own
requirements and
draw.
everything.
And figuring we will lessons learned, right?
Yeah.
And there's good plans coming in, so
Okay.
I'm super excited about it.
Amazing. Yeah, everyone is, the cool thing about over-the-air update capability is you can just improve the trucks.
Yeah,
Which is really cool. It also helps time to market because it doesn't need to be perfect at launch. You can get, 90% and then
Yeah.
just dial it in over time, which is very
Exactly.
cool. So yeah, we'll head out on the course and you let me know if we should go faster or slower, most likely, or
Sure.
whatever you
I mean,
think is
you've
good.
done the drill
Yep,
on
done
the
the drill.
dual, so anything you want to try out, let me know, or feel
Cool.
free to fiddle around,
Thank you.
explore.
Yep, first things first is I think we will just go and kind of feel cruising, listen to NVH and stuff like that. So I've actually gone cold on the temperature, low on the fan, so the camera can pick up as much as possible. And instantly more noise from the motors, of course. And so that's always an interesting situation, but we'll just kind of get up to speed and cruising. And I would say like here, 35 miles an hour is the biggest difference between the two. This has so much more audible, high frequency, either gear whine or whatever's going on in the motors compared to the others. And
sounds familiar. I like the sound, especially when you get on the throttle. It just, you know, makes a great sound.
That sound is
It's so cool. But you know, this truck is the same as what we're used to. They always have this slight steering wheel vibration, which is kind of funny. I think it's just the cogs of the tires that make it slightly get feedback because the steering is so accurate. But the one thing we really focused on in dual motor was the clutch reconnect and disconnect feeling. So, you know, you come past 17 miles an hour and it opens up. Here in all-purpose, all 4 motors are engaged all of the time. And so what's neat about that is you have power and traction whenever you want it. And the dual motor, when we were cruising at speed and I gave it some throttle, really ramps in the power smoothly, but it's not an instant hit. Here, it's just boom, there's everything. So you get so much more response when you smack the throttle down instantly. This is also positioned as the more performance, more off-road capable drivetrain. It is the top drivetrain. But the one thing I want our audience to hear is, we'll go 33. I'm just going to put it in conserve mode, and you'll hear the clutches disconnect in the back. Take a listen. And we'll just not run the air suspension out of air. But basically, you know, you can hear clunk, and there it goes. Now in conserve mode, we get the same benefits of the dual motor operating open, but I have half the power. And it's just really struggling those front tires to get moving. When I go to all-purpose, another slight ka-chunk. It's really not bad. Actually, I think mine's worse than this. It may have slightly degraded over time. But, you know, now it's just, here's all the power, which is great. So certainly love that. The other thing that we tested was launch performance in the dual motor. So what's your impression of the power between the two? It feels pretty similar to me.
Yeah, I think you'll feel like an initial lurch, like barely, like a little slight difference, but otherwise feels very much the same, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, totally. They're both like way too fast for their own
exactly.
right. So we've got the truck, you know, turned all the way down to lowest. No one's behind us. We'll do a 2-foot launch, basically to get the truck into pseudo launch mode. So here we are. Everyone holding on? Let's do it. So full send. Just rips so much harder to 60 miles an hour. I mean, it is actually a bigger difference than I was expecting. This is pretty fast, which is great. So yeah, really, really awesome to see that. It's one thing where when you daily drive the truck, you're not really launching it all that much, so it's not huge, but this gives you that wow factor off the line. At speed though, they feel similar.
Yes, I mean, yeah, above 35 or so is when it's like not much of a difference.
Yeah.
That's why like 0 to achieving the 40 is when I feel it. So
we're just going to go a little bit quicker around this corner, so everyone hold on tight slightly. I just want to show the throttle out of the corner capability. So we'll get the truck set. We're just at the edge of the tire, nice and gentle, of course. And then as we come for the exit, I can hit the throttle, and actually you can feel that outside motor overdrive with that torque vectoring. Now the other truck can do brake-based torque vectoring. You know, that's mostly for lateral transfer of power in an off-road situation. It can't overdrive the outside tire, whereas this can actually even regen a little bit on the inside, overdrive the outside, and get the truck to spin around. And that's always a fantastic feeling. We can also, if we want to do something really silly for the next corner, we have to slow down here because we're going a little bit fast. But we'll come here to go off-road, and it's only because we're in off-road mode set to highest suspension. So we got to get below 12. So high suspension, yep. We'll go drift, turn off stability. We won't do anything too crazy, I promise. Unless you're okay with it, we can do something crazy. But yeah, we'll let the truck kind of figure out its suspension needs, and we'll show everyone this mode on the way out of a corner, which is always fascinating. Just waiting for the suspension to catch up. It's got to raise us up. And, well, should be good enough. Yeah, there we go. We're great. So let's get up to speed. We'll get kind of set as a constant radius here. So then on the exit, watch what happens when I apply throttle. We will now be able to get that on throttle oversteer, which is always a great time. And again, the quad motor system actually runs out of steam for those situations. It can't do it for too long. It's good just for that initial hit and initial angle. How I drive my truck most of the time is actually in rally mode on dirt roads. And this is, I think, tuned perfectly. This is like car enthusiast mode. Keep everything soft, let it lean over. You know, all 4 tires always just on the ground because the thing's nice and gentle. And this is one of the best. Do you you ever go out ripping around in rally mode?
I've done it a few times, actually, on like dry lake bed areas.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's the extent of it. So
Yeah.
just over the last few months,
We've
training for some off-road and stuff.
the best. Yeah, we've had our truck out on some dry lake beds, and it's kind of
That's where it's
hilarious.
most fun, yeah.
And there, it's like not so drifty. You're not over driving as much, but you're getting the power to other wheels, and so it keeps the momentum going. And yeah, the truck's just really great. From a regen standpoint, we'll just go back to all-purpose standard here. We did a maximum regen test in the other truck. It was at higher state of charge, so it's not a back-to-back
Yeah.
comparison. We're at 63 here, so it can accept almost anything, but huge regen in this truck, which is great. So you can see it pulls us all the way down. The noise is so much louder. And actually, I would say that the dual motor is probably smoother at low speed and that transition.
Yeah. I think Jake or Werner would probably have a better reason.
Yeah, sure.
Than I would, but yeah, definitely there's like a sound component.
Yeah, and like I know Rivian, of course, pitches the quad motor as top, but like all the small little optimizations
Yeah, I mean,
on
it's like
dual motor.
if you think about it, right? Like your all of these three components are now in its own sub-assembly.
Yep.
So there's sounds because of different vendors' parts coming
Yes.
together, right? So
Yeah.
with it being in-house now,
It just
with the
seems
vertical
like
integration, it's
we are now heading out, and I have the truck in pretty much the same suspension drive mode settings as we had the dual motor in going over these. Now the suspension calibration is different, but fairly similar. You're not really going to feel too many of these differences. What is going to be interesting is, we did a test right here on this exact hill where I stopped here, and we applied throttle in the dual motor truck, and it just walked itself up.
Right.
No cogging, no complaints. Here, yeah, it's actually pretty good too.
Yeah.
Pretty similar. I feel like I have to certainly give this quite a little bit more throttle to encourage it to get up and over, whereas the dual motor seems great at this sort of 0 RPM crawling stuff, but this isn't super hardcore, and it's totally fine. So that was good. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this does on the rock crawl, because we did get the dual motor stuck up there.
okay.
And so we wide open throttle, and it couldn't basically torque vector enough
Yeah.
with the brakes to send the power. And that's an issue I run into often with my quad motor truck, where I'll get one wheel that's stuck in a rut. It's the only one with traction.
Yeah.
And I always complain about it, because it's like, it's an off-road vehicle, and it's great for high-speed off-roading and sort of dunes. And once it's moving, nothing can touch this truck.
Yeah.
But if you're on like an incline like this,
But then
it's-
you also, like, when you compare it to like other trucks, like when you
Yeah.
look at that, it's like a trophy truck, probably, right?
Right,
You do it,
totally.
but then when you think about it in perspective, it's kind of crazy.
we'll just get it up on the angle here a little bit, and what I want to do is get it in the same situation that we had the dual motor in, where we had a slight teeter-totter. So we'll get it just about here, I think, is when the wheel will come up. There we go. So now we have, front wheel in the air
Yeah.
and back wheel in the air. We're completely teeter-tottering, which is great. Now, when we applied throttle in the dual motor, I could hear the ABS systems kicking on and trying to send power. This should be, in theory, more silent. So let's try it out. So no noise. A little bit of brake grabbing, but it's also the tire spinning on the pavement. And of course, here it's like, there's so much delay in it kind of figuring out where to send power. And I think that's my main concern with this. But, you just give it more throttle on something like this where you're not climbing,
Yeah.
and it's no issue for it.
Just go for it. Yeah.
It just goes. It's amazing what this thing can do when there's not a huge incline in front of it. It's a heavy vehicle, of course. So that was fascinating to see. Really cool. And our truck is racing. We actually had the same thing. I've never seen that before.
Oh, yeah?
And now we had it in both vehicles back to back. Yeah.
There you go.
So we'll let it build up some more pressure as we get over. We'll let it come back to high, and then we'll do the hill climb once there. So we're good. Let's send it up. And I'm going to be purposefully like kind of on the wrong line, or
Right,
doing
exactly. Yeah.
things
I
to
do that
try and
before.
trip it up.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll just slowly walk it up here. Yeah, a little cogging there to get it moving. Yeah. So here it is. Yeah, it definitely does its job. These things are so capable.
Yeah, they especially shine in
Yes.
these situations, right? So.
Yeah, so more audible noise at low speed power. You can hear slightly more cogging there. certainly can give enough power when needed. And I'm just kind of applying a little bit. So here we are stuck. Here's full power. I'm matted, right? And it can't get the power to get us out of this situation. So we had the same thing in the dual motor. So we'll back it up a little bit, and then we'll give a little bit of 2-foot and momentum. Nope. So we'll come up. But this is the problem I run into often with my vehicle. There we go.
You otherwise just grinding that other clutch.
Yes.
Rocks.
So here we are again, of course, same situation. But this time it actually figured it out and got us up. So yeah, no, definitely got us there and did the thing. Again, totally wrong line on purpose to try and get it stuck. But yeah, that was awesome. Now we'll see some of the regen capabilities on the downhill.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we keep it in this drive mode here?
Yeah. Unless you want to try something different.
No, this seems great. Let's do it.
Awesome.
So strong regen, just like we felt in the dual motor. I would say very similar between the two. This actually felt slightly stronger on the regen at low speed than the dual motor did. So yeah, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for letting me have a go back to back. I mean, my initial impressions are fans are on in both trucks. Both trucks had similar, you know, sort of drivetrain weaknesses when you get it really stuck and do everything wrong. And the strengths are, this is just slightly faster, slightly more fun on a back road. It definitely is the top drivetrain, I would say. But for most people, I think the dual motor is probably the way to go. It's just quieter, smoother. Yeah, I like the dual motor quite a bit. Thanks for letting me have a rip.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, guys, there you saw me drive the dual motor and the quad motor back to back, the same two courses. One thing I hadn't really explained up to this point in the video is, why is a clutch disconnect so important? Well, when you have a permanent magnet electric motor, they create something called back EMF, and it's basically flux-related losses that happen in the motor when it's not being used. It can actually create a little bit of drag, and especially at certain speeds, at high speeds, you actually need to drive the motor just to get it to freewheel, you know, at relatively high speeds. The thing is, when you disconnect the rear axle or your secondary axle, in this case it's Rivian, is the rear axle is the secondary axle, you are reducing all the back EMF and the gear train loss of that particular motor, so that you basically have less internal resistance moving the car. It kind of makes sense. But I do also have to bring up the fact that both Lucid and Tesla, with the Plaid drivetrain, and Lucid's, all of their drivetrains, are dual permanent magnet motors. In the case of the Plaid, it's 3 permanent magnet motors with no disconnects. And they have really great control of back EMF, but they also have much smaller and less crazy huge gear trains in those vehicles. Some of the Rivian engineers were saying, even if it was an induction motor, which that's a type of electric motor that doesn't create any back EMF, it can just freewheel essentially without creating electrical current, because there's no magnets on the rotor itself. Even if it was an induction motor, or even if they could control the back EMF perfectly, it was still worth it to them to put in this clutch disconnect because of the losses from the gear train itself. Now, in terms of that disconnect and reconnect strategy, each automaker is a little bit different. For example, we've driven eGMP, the Hyundai Kia Genesis cars, have a clutch disconnect on the front axle. In that case, those vehicles' primary axle is the rear axle, reverse of the Rivian. And I think that's actually probably the way it should be. I wish Rivian would make the rear axle the primary axle, but they didn't. Gear ratios are better for highway cruising on the front. I don't think it's that big of a deal, because they could still juice the rear motor really hard. And so when you look at that disconnect and reconnect strategy compared to eGMP, it seems to me, and again, I only drove it for 2 or 3 laps of the track, like a much faster reconnect and disconnect than the eGMP stuff. In like a Hyundai, Ioniq 5, if you're just cruising down the highway and map the throttle, it gives the rear motor everything it can, and then there's another layer of power that's added on top when the front motor rev matches, connects, and then can apply power. Here, they definitely hid the reconnect and the power ramp-up strategy, so it doesn't hit as hard as the quad motor as you saw, but during that power feed-in, they're feeding that rear, or I should say the front motor in as the rear is connecting, and it can just basically smoothly get you to full power. Now, what's nice is, in tow mode and in sport mode, the dual motor system is connected 100% of the time. And one thing I thought was interesting is they actually keep the rear axle disconnected all the way up to top speed if you're just cruising. So you can really get a lot of speed on in still just front wheel drive mode. And there's no way to really shut that off, nor would you want to. There's a slight audible noise, but I gotta say, under normal driving, when you come past 17 miles an hour on the acceleration or below 12 on the deceleration, you barely notice it, barely feel it. When you go wide open throttle, you barely notice it, barely feel it. But if you transition from all purpose, which is when it does its automatic disconnect, reconnect, into sport mode under mid throttle, you can tell they didn't tune that fully baked yet. I'm sure that will get better through software. It seems like they tuned all of the most common driving scenarios to be super smooth on that reconnect disconnect function. And talking to the team, it sounds like, I was talking to Wasim at Software. He was working with the chassis guys, and they were going back and forth for months to really smooth all this out. I think there's still a little bit more fine tuning to do, but it's pretty amazing. And I gotta say, they can easily launch the truck with this with no problems. It's just if you're mid throttle and go from all purpose where it's disconnected to sport, you do feel a little bit more of a ka-chunk. The other benefit, of course, of putting the secondary axle on the rear motor, I just wanted to sort of share all my thoughts here, is under a regen situation, under a hard deceleration, you're going to get most of that regen from vehicle stability and also just the amount of power you can put in from the front axle, because all the weight's going to come in and that can do all the regen. And not having to reconnect every time you do a big regen hit or have to wait for it to reconnect for a regen hit is really smart, I think. So it seems really nicely tuned. In terms of noise performance, just to reiterate, dual motor is significantly quieter than quad motor. The half shaft clock ticking and clocking from the quad motor system, they said they've taken care of in the dual motor system. We'll of course test it. They also claim they've taken care of it with a washer in the quad motor system, but it keeps coming back on my truck and I have the washer. So some drivetrain concerns here from my side from an NVH perspective. But dual motor, I just think is the way to go for like any driving scenario. Of course, we talked about the differential lock as well, and I showed scenarios where I got the dual motor and the quad motor completely stuck, both at 100% throttle application to give the systems. And you can watch the video. My foot was welded for a while to the floor just to let the systems figure out where to send power, how to send power, and it's so simple. They should have just put an electronic differential lock in the dual motor system. It really truly needs it for it to be the top system. Now it's not the top system. The quad motor is the top system, and that needs a differential lock. Waiting for software, this delay, this lag, and the inability, if you just have one tire with traction, from stall torque is what Rivian was saying is their main concern. They really can't get that thing spinning off the line. And you can see, all happen in the video there, but it just seems like, okay, the perfect drivetrain to me in a Rivian would be to update the quad motor system with these dual motors. So take the in-house, 3-in-1 system, which is motor, gearbox, and inverter. That's all done by Rivian. Get rid of the Bosch stuff. Put 4 of those in a truck instead of 2, and have a physical locker in the back somehow. Because right now there's no mechanical connection left and right. I don't know how you do it, but software isn't working. We've yet to drive a software locking differential that actually works, a virtual locker. If they can sort that out in the future, that's when I think it's worthy of the top drivetrain. That's when I think it's worthy of the extra price. Right now, my suggestion for all of you guys, if you're on the fence, should you go dual motor or quad motor? Again, just go dual motor. It's fast as hell. It's so much quieter, so much more refined, so much more efficient, and it's all done and built and baked in-house. And I really love a fully integrated system. We'll go through like the production line, and I'll just show you a few clips, and then we'll talk a little bit more nerd stuff about cooling, inverters, oil situation, how it's cooled versus the quad motor. Yeah, we'll get into all that here in a second. So let's go right now from the delivery center over to the factory, which is just, I don't know, it's about a 2-minute drive or a 10-minute walk or so. You go by all of the vehicles waiting for logistics to pick them up and to ship them out. And then we'll go down down a factory tour where I was lucky enough to go on a golf cart with all the other media, and we went through the entire factory, but I really was only able to film the motor line and the audio's really bad. So I apologize, but I'll put in as much as I can and of course overlay where needed.
We're going to go through the process a little bit backwards in some cases. So we'll come down, we'll go through stamping, like I said earlier, if you recall, the 6 stamping presses and the 2 injection molding machines are really the only 8 pieces of equipment that we kept from Mitsubishi. So everybody knows that, you know, a big stamping press, the capital, the lead time, right? It made sense to keep stamping presses and they're very utilized. We'll come out of stamping, we'll come into body assembly, go through RPV body. So just for, I'll go back and forth because I find myself going back and forth between RPV and EDV. So RPV was our original name, internal name, right? Rivian Prime Van, and then EDV for electric delivery van.
Guys, you join me in the factory now where we are going to be going down the rotor and stator production line. We'll have a quick preview with some of the engineers talking about the setup, the overall design, and we're going to stop at a few different stations throughout where we can actually see the production line and see how this all flows. The audio in here is pretty bad, so bear with me. But overall, it's going to be the production line of the dual motor Enduro, which we are right next to the main vehicle line, which is actually right in front of me. This is a new tacked on portion of the factory since actually the last time I've been here, so pretty big expansion. So let me show you a few different components of the motors and we'll see what we can get. But of course, filming in here is going to be pretty rough. Just to show you what they have here on display, you have the whole drive unit assembly, how it hooks into the vehicle. You can see how much smaller it is than the quad motor setup. You have Silva over here who designed much of this. A full oil-cooled system here, inverter. This is probably the silicon carbide inverter to display. You have the rotor right here, which is super cool, oil-cooled to the rotor itself. And then the stator over this way, of course, bathed in oil, has a drip system and a splashing around system. So we have to keep moving. We're getting pushed along here, but let's head on the way. 13 bended hairpins, 2 which are not U-shaped.
This is the power module that we use. We have there are 6 switches in the power module, 2 per phase. And what they actually do in this operation of the inverter, they chop the DC voltage. They operate at 10 kilohertz, and they pass a small chunk of the DC power to the AC output. And this is how you actually create the AC voltage to feed the motor with. This action of the switches is actually controlled by the brain of the inverter. This is the microprocessor that's built into controller card that we have in the inverter. And the signals from the microprocessor are amplified by the gate driver card that then drives the power switch. Inverter technology is something that we in-sourced even on Origin. R1T and R1S have internally developed inverter. Dual power inverter module is actually built just very close to us. The reason we did that is because it was very important for us to control the motor, regardless, in that case, even P1 supplied motor, but we wanted to control that motor in the most optimal way and get the most performance out of the motor. And when we have our own inverter, then we are fully in control of the performance of the inverter and the motor and the performance of the system. In Enduro, we went one step further, and we actually designed the whole drive unit together, as Henry was explaining. And we designed them as a system. And when we design them as a system, then we can actually optimize the system. And when I talk about system, I talk about inverter, electric motor, and the gear ratio that we are going to use in the drive unit. And Henry also mentioned that we develop a bunch of drive cycles, what is important for our vehicles. So those drive cycles and performance requirements are input to a very sophisticated internally developed optimization program that then runs through many combinations of different power levels for the inverter, current level, or different motor-based configurations, different gear ratios, and actually selects the optimum combination for the particular vehicle requirements that we want to have. So this unit is very purposely designed for our vehicle and the way our vehicles and the way we use our vehicles. And it's designed to be used across our vehicle portfolio. On the mechanical side, I think Henry already mentioned the inverter is built in the cover of the 3-in-1. This allows us to actually have manufacturing that just focuses on building the inverter in the cover. We get the assembled inverter here and we test it before we marry it with the drive unit. On this poster, we show the main components of the inverter, and we also have them on the table. The component that I want to talk about is the power module. It's the part of the inverter. And we said that the inversion of power from DC to AC is accomplished by switching actions of this power module. And because there is switching action, and these power modules also conduct current from DC to AC, they of course have their losses. And this is why we have to cool these power modules really well. We have a pin pins on the other side of the power module, and they immerse into water, ethylene glycol liquid in the inverter chassis. This power module, like our origin power module, comes in two flavors. It comes in the silicon IGBT and comes in the silicon carbide MOSFETs. That gives us flexibility on the supply chain side and ability to choose between the two. The other reason why we do this is because these are fundamentally different power semiconductor devices. And the IGBTs are less efficient than silicon carbide devices. So silicon carbide devices, on the other hand, are more costly. So when you build an inverter with IGBTs and Enduro inverter with IGBTs, the peak efficiency that we get in the low to mid speed range is a little bit shy of 98%. When you build it with silicon carbide devices, the peak efficiency in that range is slightly above 99%. So we have this efficiency gain in the inverter, and when we look what that translates to at the vehicle level, this translates into about 3.5% improvement in the range. And this gives our vehicle line ability to then deploy these differently built inverters that actually, with different power modules, that actually are completely the same mechanically on their external interfaces, and optimize the vehicle portfolio the way we need it. So I briefly mention some of the other components that we have. Capacitor is a custom designed capacitor. That's a filtering component that filters the switching current ripple that's generated by the power module and prevents it from going back to the DC bus. What sits on top of the power module is the gate driver card. What's worth mentioning is that we went away from soldering the power modules to the gate driver card, the signal pins of it. We actually do press fit on this line. So these pins are built in such a way that we can press fit the gate driver card across it. And then we have the EMI shield between the gate driver card and the controller card, and the controller card gets mounted on this EMI shield, so it does have a structural purpose as well. When we look at the controller cards are all designed in-house, and they're just manufactured by a PCBA manufacturer, but this is completely internally designed inverter, and even some components that we don't make, like capacitor, are built to our spec, and specs are derived from those simulations and vehicle profiles that we talked about. When you look at the mechanical execution of the inverter, we try to actually minimize the number of capacitors. We try to minimize the number of internal harnesses. So you'll see that we deploy now welding of the joint on the DC side. The DC input is welded to the capacitor and welded to the power modules. And on the AC side, there are still bolted joints. On the internal harnesses, you'll see that we have a board-to-board connector between our controller card and our gate driver card. As well, on our current sensor, this is a device that I haven't mentioned yet. It's a device at the output of these AC tabs that you insert to measure the current that's going into the motor. And this is your way of actually controlling the torque of electric motor. You control it by measuring the current that's actually going into the motor, because there is a really good correlation between the current and torque. And this device also doesn't have an internal harness. It's actually pressed pin into the gate drive board as well. So in summary, this is an inverter that has really high capabilities. It replaces the dual inverter, which is actually two inverter, and it has about more than 80 up to 90% of the dual inverter capability in a much smaller package. And on the mechanical side, we try to advance the design, as I said, by reducing the number of fasteners and making the whole build and execution of the inverter easier for manufacturing.
Why is there this empty space?
This empty space is obviously not used, and it's driven by the interfaces on the drive unit. As Henry explained, this is actually built in a cover, so you test the inverter and then you take it and you flip it over.
What we have in front of us here is a cutaway that shows some of the parts that we didn't get to see a little bit earlier, more on the mechanical side, the gear train, the differential, and then also nested within the differential in some of the drive units with the disconnect clutch. Contextually, we looked at the parts, and Silva did a fantastic job going into a lot of details into power conversion aspect at a very high level, just to kind of walk the team through sort of how that power flow enters the inverter and exits as mechanical torque of the drive unit. We talked about the inverter having the primary function of converting the DC power from the battery pack into AC that's consumed by the machine. Within the motor cavity itself are the active parts, the stator and the rotor, where the stator and the rotor coupled through the magnetic flux initiates essentially the torque development at the rotor, and then coupled to the essentially a two-stage reduction, but a single ratio reduction of the gear train. We have the torque amplification or the multiplication from the rotor shaft on through down, eventually exiting the drive unit to the wheels. What we're seeing here is the sort of the other half of the drive unit, if you will, of the gear set. I mentioned the two-stage reduction, so we have a single input gear, a single intermediate gear assembly, which essentially takes the first stage from the input gear and then multiplies that into the second stage to the output gear. So this unit here is actually has two gears on one shaft. And so from there, the output gear, the final production gear, nested within that is the differential assembly. So we've got a couple different flavors of that. We've got a traditional open differential. We also have for the rear drive unit of R1, a disconnect clutch that sits within, or that's integrated within the differential. And that's the other flavor that we've got. The way that the disconnect works, and this is a little bit different from the quad motor drive system today, is that it's actually fully integrated to the internal of the drive unit, whereas on the quad, we've got a single or a standalone disconnect clutch on either side of the quad motor drive system. On the Enduro system, it is nested within the drive unit, and the way we do that is through essentially electromagnetic coupling system. We translate an actuator that moves a component with essentially a couple of spline interfaces that, depending on your operational mode, will couple or decouple the differential gears from the main output gear. So visually, you can kind of imagine the output from the differential is always spinning with the tire, and as we elect to disconnect, this gear itself will fundamentally stop moving within the drive unit even as the vehicle is driving down the road. And so that's, in a nutshell, how we essentially take the torque that's created by the motor and amplify it through the drive unit. And then in terms of the output, it's actually very similar in the sense that it's virtually a center line of the vehicle, so we still have that torque symmetry from a vehicle dynamic standpoint. We didn't touch, we talked a lot about the oil cooling of the e-machine. We didn't talk a lot about sort of the holistic cooling of the drive unit and how that integrates into the rest of the vehicle. But as part of the integrated system that we've got, we see a single inlet for coolant into the inverter that, as Phil mentioned, cools the power module, and through channeling within the drive unit, we actually direct that coolant directly into the oil coolant, the seat exchanger here that I'm kind of pointing at. And then from there, this heat exchanger essentially takes the heat from the oil that's just come from the hot rotor and stator components and gearbox components, and is able to basically exchange that into the coolant, which then gets whisked away through a single outlet back out to the vehicular thermal system and rejected into ambient. So it's really, when we talk about integration, it's not just the mechanical bits, it's also how we thought about plumbing in this case. So just another example of that. I'm very conscious of time, and I promised that we would do some Q&A as well. So if anybody has any questions, fire away.
During rapid,
I have
sorry,
a little bit so the team can hear.
when you have a battery preconditioning request and you're using the motors to help heat up the high voltage system, how many kilowatts of waste heat roughly can you produce per motor when you have a preconditioning request?
That's a good question, actually. Sil will probably have the exact number, but it's on the order of, we've got 2 on board, so it's on the order of about 4 kilowatts each.
Each, okay.
So I can correct me if that is needed. Any questions?
Well, guys, we're already like an hour and 10 minutes into this thing, and I haven't even nerded out about the rotor assembly or anything to do with the bus bars inside the motor, and we haven't really talked about the cooling package that much. But I think we're going to cut it here because honestly, you can watch Monroe's teardown video about all the nerd stuff. I think the high level point of this is you should understand that the inverter is water cooled, and the rotor and stator are actually oil cooled and oil bathed. They have a drip system, but also the way that everything and all the jets work from an oil cooling system means that the whole thing is splashing around in there, which is great. A little bit different than Lucid's situation, where they can actually run oil right through the actual stator itself, which is really cool. And they run them basically where there's eddy currents. That's like next level. This is pretty cool, but it's also way better from a thermal standpoint than the quad motor system, which has no internal oil cooling except just this, basically water glycol around the outside of the stator in this jacket. And we noticed some very early thermal derates because of that. There's a way to measure thermal performance of an electric motor, and maybe we'll do a whole video on it one day, but basically there's peak power and constant power. And actually here in Germany, what's interesting is the vehicle registration needs to show constant power. That's what the vehicles are rated at. And what's cool is you see very, very common 30% is constant power relative to peak, which means you lose 70% of performance over like a 30-minute hard drive cycle. In this case, Rivian was saying over 50% peak to constant power, which means that there's a lot of headroom. There's pretty good thermals here. And they were like, yeah, you're not going to overheat this thing really nearly as easily as you will the quad motor. So in summary, because I feel like we've gone on, and I'm not sure if you guys want more nerd or less nerd, let me know in the comments. I mean, we could really dive deep into this thing. What you really need to know is if you're on the fence between dual motor and quad motor, my recommendation is go dual motor. I think for 99% of use cases and 99% of people, that's kind of the way to go. It's quieter. It's nearly just as quick. Forget about what the numbers say. Just test drive them back to back. Again, I did. And I'm like, yeah, the quad motor's definitely got a harder launch, especially when you 2-foot it. But how often are you doing that? And honestly, most of the time, you're driving the truck in all-purpose mode, and they're both derated in all-purpose mode at higher suspension, like we discussed in the video too. So you're not really getting 835 horsepower in the quad motor unless you drop it to the ground, have a fully charged battery, everything's warmed up, like you're just driving normally. Get the dual motor. For extreme off-roading scenarios, if you're going to do a lot of elephant steps or a lot of like wheel in the air type situation, certainly the quad motor keeps you moving along a little bit better. Just because you have, there's always a wheel on the ground with a motor that's at least applying throttle. However, if you're in an extreme situation, like I got the trucks on that hill, and you want to be able to have torque transfer laterally cross car, well, what you need is a locking differential ideally. But with the dual motor, you can actually lock the wheel that's spinning and get the extra power on that axle to the wheel that is that has traction. That's the idea. In theory, we found the brakes don't grab hard enough and it still lets it spin even, at full power. So, okay, maybe some tuning still to be done there. And also just so much room for a locking differential. I'm really surprised they didn't do that here. I personally believe the vehicles need them for extreme off-road. The quad motor certainly still is the top drivetrain. It's cool. The torque vectoring is awesome. It sounds really good if you're into that. And of course, it's just like, yeah, I got 4 motors in my truck. I can go off-road, do all these things, drift it around. Like it's the breadth of capability is larger. But for how I notice my friends who own Rivians and how everyone I know like just does some light trails and goes around Colorado and wheels and it's not really like bouncing this thing off of, hardcore obstacles like I am. I really think the dual motor's just like the one to go for. So I think they made the dual motor so good, it's actually hard to recommend the quad motor. Very rarely do we see that. It shows Rivian went all in. I really hope they update the quad motor system to have higher thermal capabilities, higher torque vectoring capabilities so you can get it unstuck, and probably some better NVH as well. Also with the half shaft stuff, that system is due for an upgrade here pretty soon, is what I'll be asking for. Anyways, great to meet the team. Great to talk to everyone about all of my impressions and share this video with you. Again, I didn't really have time at the factory to put together a fully enclosed, summed up video, so you're stuck with another hour and 15-minute long out of spec video that's very poorly shot, but that's what you get on this channel. So big apologies to you on that, and we'll see you on another one soon. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.